It's time for one last question and answer session before the end of the year. I asked for your questions on my Facebook page, and here's what you came up with. Michael said, I noticed the video quality of your YouTube videos has been crystal clear as of a few months ago. What camera settings and/or program settings are you using to get that amazing quality and clarity? Well, Michael, thank you for noticing. I did change things up recently. I started shooting at 60 frames per second. I've been shooting at 1080p for quite some time, but I've been resistant to moving from 30 frames per second to 60. Frankly, I just wasn't sure if I liked how it looked, but I did it. I use my Nikon D810 and typically either use my 24-70 f2.8 or my 85mm f1.8 prime lens. That 85mm is probably the sharpest lens I own, but the 24-70 is definitely no slouch. I do talk about details about how I shoot my videos in a video, and you can find the video in the link above. Next question is from Carmen. I'm inspired by your video on self-portrait. You are so right. It feels so different being in front of the camera, but it was so much fun. Anyway, I think this would be a fun way for me to take some family portraits. What settings would you recommend for group shots to stay in focus? I'll be using self-timer or remote triggers. And I'm glad you had a good time, Carmen. I'm due to take some family portraits of my family this holiday season. The trouble for me is wrangling everyone together. For settings, it's going to depend on what gear you're using, how big your group is, how you're set up, like how far your camera is away from the people, and your environment, like how much light you have in the room and if you're using studio lighting. In general, though, I'd say that you'll want to keep your shutter speed fast enough to prevent any motion blur from someone moving a bit. This becomes especially important if you have kids in the picture because they're wigglers. Something like 1/125th would be good. For aperture, you want to keep it narrow enough to keep everyone in focus, and you can play with a depth of field calculator online to experiment with distances and apertures. I usually start with like f5.6, take a test shot, make sure everyone's in focus, and then just adjust from there if I need to. Remember to focus on someone in the front of the group though, because you have more depth of field behind the autofocus point than you do in front of the autofocus point. And last, don't be afraid to increase your ISO sensitivity. As you narrow that aperture, you're allowing less light into the camera, so you may need to bring up the ISO a bit. And to me, a little bit of noise in a family photo is an okay trade-off to get everybody in the shot. Desiree says, Canon 24-70 with IS or Sigma 24-70 2.8. I asked my husband for a 24-70 for Christmas. Can't decide whether low light or IS is more important. Also, do you think the 24-70 is a good upgrade to my kit lenses? I am going to start with your last question first. Is the 24-70 a good upgrade to kit lenses? And my answer is that it's going to depend on what you find lacking with your current lenses. I can't say that the 24-70 is a really popular lens. I have the Nikon version. I like using it on my full frame Nikon body, but it is pretty heavy, so I don't use it as like a walk around lens all that often. And I also don't use it on my cropped sensor bodies because I find that it puts me too close with the crop factor. I'd rather use the Nikon 17-55 f2.8. Going back to the first question, which version of the lens? And there are two issues here. Do you need image stabilization, and should you go with name brand or third party? First, whether or not you need image stabilization. I don't have it on my 24-70, nor do I have it on the 17-55 DX lens, which is the same effective focal range on a lens designed for cropped sensor bodies. And I've never felt that I needed it. I've talked to others, though, who like the option because they have shaky hands, so that's going to be personal preference. Second, name brand or third party. A couple people commented with opinions on this because everyone has an opinion on it. One person pointed out that Tamron has a 24-70 f2.8 with image stabilization, and Tamron does, so that's definitely something to take into consideration. Someone else said that Canon has the best build quality, so you should use that. I disagree here. I don't think that you should automatically go with the more expensive Canon version of the lens, though I do agree that build quality will be superior on it. That isn't the only consideration when going third party though. I have a video where I talk about my experience with third party lenses and things that you should consider like build quality. You can see it at the link above. Definitely watch the video if you're thinking about going with a third-party lens. After all that, Desiree, if you're still not sure, shoot me an email or a private message on Facebook, and I can help you make a decision based upon your needs and the gear that you already have. On to a question from Dewan. Hello, how are you? Good, thank you. Are you ready for the holidays yet? LOL. Absolutely not. LOL. I just recently got the Nikon D810 and a D800, and I have the Nikon 50mm 1.8, 28mm 2.8, 85mm 1.8, and the 80 to 200mm 2.8. I want a macro lens that I can use, but that is multi-purpose, if you know what I mean. I like to shoot mostly portraits and events. Oh yes, also I want a long lens to shoot sports with both indoor and outdoor, something that is capable of gathering light indoors without having to boost the ISO too high. Any suggestions? Thank you. Okay, you want a macro lens and a long lens to shoot sports. Let's start with macro. In your list of gear, I see that you have several primes. I love primes, and one of mine is the 105mm f2.8D lens. There is a newer G version as well. I like the D lens because it's relatively inexpensive, but I'm no expert in macro photography. I don't do it all that often, so I want to open this up to all of you out there. If you like macro photography, what is your favorite lens to use? Let us know in the comments. As for sports in low light, 200mm at f2.8 is already pretty good, and you have that. You aren't going to find anything that will have a wider aperture capability than f2.8. There is a 300mm f2.8 prime lens that is very expensive, and even a 400mm f2.8 that is even more expensive. Keep in mind though that the D800 and the D810 do really well at higher ISO sensitivities. If you creep it up a bit, you really shouldn't find much noise. Kevin asks, what music do you like to listen to when you photograph or edit? Are you one to break out into a victory dance after editing an extensive shoot, or if you capture a stunning photo? I'm known to break out into dance no matter if there's music around or no matter if I'm celebrating something. But talking about music when I edit, I don't always listen to music while I'm editing. And when I do, it depends on my mood and I go through phases. But right now I'm into instrumental stuff, particularly classical violin or Native American flute. Although, now that I think about it, I was listening to some blues the other day while I was editing. Sometimes I'll put something like that on that I'll really rock out to if I need to get edits done fast and really not think too much about them. If I have a lot of good photos, I can tend to overthink and spend too much time making decisions on like which photos to edit. If I take my mind off of it a little bit with some good music, I can just move through it a little more quickly. Ty wants to know, how many cameras do you have and which is your favorite? I have something in the vicinity of 7, plus a few film cameras. My favorite though, I absolutely cannot answer that question. I like to use my different cameras with different lenses at different times and for different things. They are all my little children. Larry's question is, I know you have answered tons of questions on lenses, but I have one more. When buying a lens, have you ever purchased a used lens? If you have, do you recommend or not recommend? I want to practice with prime lenses, but don't want the heavy price tag. I've purchased several prime lenses. I think it can be a great way to go when you want to save money. I will only purchase them, though, if I can try them out first. So I meet somewhere safe, I bring a camera body, and make sure everything works. My last question of the day is from Toby. Toby says, hello, SnapChick. Any way to use Instagram on a Kindle Fire? The older Kindle Fire and the newer Amazon Fire tablets all have the capability to run apps, and there is an Instagram app in the Amazon store. So you download it, you sign in, and you're set. And that's it this month and for this year. Never fear though, you can watch a bunch of my previous Q&A videos in the playlist above, and I will definitely be around posting videos, answering questions, so keep an eye on my Facebook page. If you haven't found me there, there's a link to it in the description below.